Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Nightingale, watching the stars streak past as her ship traveled through hyperspace. The hospital ship was the newest and largest in Earth's medical fleet. Its white hull gleamed with red crosses painted on every side. Inside its cargo bays, 50,000 medical pods waited to save lives. Elena had been a doctor before she became a ship captain. She remembered every patient she could not save. That was why she volunteered for this mission. The colony world of Haven's Rest needed help, and Earth always answered when people were dying. 3 days ago, a massive solar flare had hit Haven's Rest. The star in the Kepler 442 system had exploded with radiation. The energy wave destroyed the planet's protective shields and knocked out power across the world. 2 million beings from 12 different species lived on Haven's Rest. Now they were trapped under collapsed buildings, slowly dying from radiation poisoning. Elena's convoy carried hope. 5 ships traveled together through the dark of space. The Nightingale led the way, followed by 2 more hospital ships, the Mercy and the Good Samaritan. Behind them came 2 supply vessels loaded with food, water, and building materials. A single military ship, the UES Guardian, protected them all. Commander Sarah Chen commanded the Guardian. The small frigate was fast but not heavily armed. It was meant to guard against pirates, not fight a real war. But Chen was Elena's oldest friend, and Elena trusted her completely. Captain Vasquez called Lieutenant Torres from the navigation station. "We're approaching the Haven's Rest system." Elena nodded. "Take us out of hyperspace. Send the standard humanitarian broadcast on all frequencies." The stars stopped moving as the convoy dropped back into normal space. Ahead of them hung Haven's Rest, a blue-green world wrapped in brown clouds. The planet looked sick. Elena could see the damage even from space. Torres activated the communication system. His voice echoed across the star system. "This is the Earth Humanitarian Convoy UES Nightingale. We are carrying medical supplies and personnel to assist with disaster relief on Haven's Rest. We are operating under Galactic Humanitarian Protocol 7. Please acknowledge." Elena studied the scanner readings. Something was wrong. Too many ships moved in the system's outer regions. Military ships. "Captain," said Torres, his voice tight with worry. "I'm reading 23 warships in the system. They're not responding to our humanitarian broadcast." Elena frowned. The hegemony controlled this region of space, but they usually respected medical missions. The hegemony was a military alliance of several alien species. They were strict and unfriendly, but they followed galactic law. "Keep broadcasting our mission," Elena ordered. "Make sure they know we're here to help civilians." Minutes passed. Then the communication system crackled to life. An alien voice spoke in perfect English, but the words carried threat. "Human convoy. This is Admiral Thekvar of the Saurian Dominion. You are ordered to leave this system immediately." Elena stepped forward. "Admiral, we are on a humanitarian mission. The colony on Haven's Rest requires immediate medical assistance. We request permission to proceed with our relief operations." "Permission denied," Thekvar replied coldly. "This system is under quarantine. No ships may approach the planet." Elena felt anger rise in her chest. "Admiral, there are dying people on that world. Children, families, innocents from 12 species. We have the supplies and medical teams to save them. The quarantine cannot be lifted," the alien admiral said. "Turn around and leave now, or you will be removed by force." Elena looked at the tactical display. More hegemony ships were moving toward them. The convoy was surrounded. Her 5 ships faced an entire battle fleet. Commander Chen's voice came through on a private channel. "Elena, I'm reading 57 enemy ships now. We're seriously outnumbered." Elena closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about the medical teams aboard her ships. Doctors, nurses, and volunteers who had left their families to help strangers. She thought about the people dying on Haven's Rest, waiting for help that might never come. "We're not leaving," Elena said into the communication system. "Admiral Thekvar, we have 50,000 medical pods aboard our ships. We have surgical teams, radiation treatment equipment, and enough supplies to keep the colony alive for 6 months. Those people need us. Final warning, human. Leave now. Elena looked at her crew. They all watched her, waiting for orders. These were good people who believed in helping others. They had volunteered to risk their lives to save strangers. Torres, launch the medical shuttles, Elena commanded. Begin evacuation of the most critical patients from the planet's surface. Captain, Torres said quietly. The hegemony ships are powering their weapons. Elena squared her shoulders. The shuttles are clearly marked as medical transports. They won't fire on medical ships. It would violate every treaty and law in the galaxy. The first shuttle launched from the Nightingale's Bay. It was small and white, with red crosses painted on its hull. The shuttle headed toward Haven's Rest, carrying a surgical team and emergency supplies. More shuttles followed from the other hospital ships. Soon, 12 small medical transports moved toward the dying world. Admiral Thekvar's voice cut through the silence again. Human ships, recall your shuttles immediately, or we will consider this an act of aggression. Elena grabbed the communication microphone. Admiral, those are medical shuttles carrying doctors and medical supplies. You have no authority to prevent humanitarian aid. All ships in this system operate under my authority, Thekvar replied. You have been warned. Elena watched the tactical display. The hegemony ships were moving closer. Their weapons were charged and ready. But they would not fire on medical ships. No civilized species would attack doctors and nurses trying to save lives. Commander Chen's voice crackled through the communication system. Elena, the enemy fleet is taking attack positions. I'm moving Guardian between them and your ships. Elena felt her heart race. Something was very wrong. The hegemony ships were acting like the medical convoy was a military threat. As if helping dying people was some kind of crime. All ships, maintain course, Elena ordered. Continue medical operations. They won't fire on humanitarian vessels. The first medical shuttle reached Haven's Rest and began landing procedures. On the surface, dying people waited for salvation. In space, alien warships surrounded the convoy that had come to save them. Elena had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything would change forever. Admiral Thekvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon. The massive Saurian warship could destroy any human vessel with a single shot. Around him, his officers watched the tactical display showing the human convoy. Admiral, said his weapons officer, the human medical shuttles are landing on the planet's surface. Should we intercept them? Thekvar's cold reptilian eyes studied the display. The humans had ignored his warnings. They acted like their mission was more important than his authority. For months, the hegemony had been testing human resolve. Earth was new to space travel, and their ships were weak. Most species learned quickly that the hegemony controlled this region of space, but these humans kept coming. They broadcast their humanitarian mission like it gave them special protection. They thought their medical ships made them untouchable. Sir, called the communications officer, the human ship Nightingale is broadcasting again. Thekvar listened as Captain Vasquez's voice filled his bridge. Admiral Thekvar, our medical teams report thousands of critical patients on the planet's surface. We request immediate permission to begin full evacuation procedures. Time is running out for these people. 2000. The Admiral's tail lashed with anger. The human female spoke to him like an equal. She gave him updates, as if he cared about alien lives, on that worthless world. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, more human shuttles are launching. They're ignoring our warnings completely. Thekvar watched 8 more medical transports leave the human ships. Each shuttle carried red crosses and broadcast medical emergency codes. They were obviously civilian vessels with no weapons, but they were also a challenge to his authority. Open a channel to the human convoy, Thekvar ordered. When the connection opened, he spoke slowly and clearly. Captain Vasquez, I am giving you one final warning. Recall all your shuttles and leave this system immediately. If you do not comply, I will consider your presence an act of aggression. Captain Vasquez's response came quickly. Admiral, we are conducting humanitarian operations under galactic law. We are not a military threat. We are doctors and nurses trying to save lives. You are in violation of a quarantine order, Thekvar replied. Military or not, you will obey my commands. Through the viewport, Thekvar could see the white hulls of the human ships. They were beautiful vessels, clearly designed for healing rather than war. Their red crosses gleamed against their white paint, but they represented something Thekvar hated: human arrogance, human belief that their feelings mattered more than proper authority. For too long, humans had been spreading through the galaxy with their soft ideas about helping everyone. Admiral, his weapons officer said quietly, the humans are not backing down. What are your orders? Thekvar stared at the tactical display. He could destroy all 5 human ships in minutes. But they were medical vessels. Attacking them would cause problems with the Galactic Council. Other species might object. Then again, maybe it was time to send a message. Maybe the galaxy needed to learn that human sentimentality had limits. Target their shuttle landing zones, Thekvar ordered. Fire warning shots near the planet's surface. Show them we are serious. His weapons officer hesitated. Sir, there are medical personnel in those areas. Warning shots near the planet could... Fire the warning shots, Thekvar snapped. The weapons officer's claws moved over his controls. But something went wrong. Maybe he misunderstood the order. Maybe his aim was off. Maybe he had been waiting for an excuse to hurt humans. The plasma cannons fired, but not at empty space near the planet. The bright energy beams struck directly at the medical shuttles. Captain Elena Vasquez watched in horror from the Nightingale's bridge as 2 of her shuttles exploded in brilliant flashes. The small medical transports had no shields, no armor, no way to protect themselves. They carried doctors, nurses, and medical supplies. Now they were burning debris falling toward Haven's Rest. Torres, Elena shouted. Did you see that? Did they just... Captain. They fired directly at our medical shuttles. Torres could barely speak. Shuttle 7 and Shuttle 3 are gone. All hands lost. Elena could not believe what she was seeing. No civilized species attacked medical vessels. It violated every law and treaty in the galaxy. It was unthinkable, but the hegemony ships were not done. More plasma beams lanced through space. This time they targeted the Nightingale itself. The massive hospital ship's shields flared as energy weapons struck its hull. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Direct hit on Medical Bay 7, reported the damage control officer. We have casualties. Elena grabbed the communication system. Admiral Thekvar, cease fire immediately. We are a medical vessel operating under humanitarian protocols. The only response was more weapons fire. The Good Samaritan, one of the supply ships, took a direct hit to its cargo bay. The explosion was massive. Tons of medical supplies and food meant for dying colonists burned in space. Commander Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Guardian as her best friend's convoy was systematically destroyed. The small frigate was outnumbered 50-1. But Chen could not stand by and watch medical ships being murdered. All weapons, target the nearest hegemony cruiser, Chen ordered. Return fire. Her tactical officer looked at her in shock. Commander, we can't fight their entire fleet. We can buy time, Chen said grimly. Maybe the other ships can escape. The Guardian was a small ship, but it was fast, and its crew knew how to fight. Chen's missiles struck the nearest hegemony vessel, damaging its engines. For a moment, the aliens stopped firing at the medical ships and turned their attention to the Guardian. But there were too many of them. Chen's ship lasted 17 minutes against overwhelming odds. She used every trick she knew, dodging between asteroids and using the planet's gravity to confuse enemy targeting. Her crew fought with desperate courage, knowing they were protecting helpless medical personnel. In the end, plasma fire overwhelmed the Guardian's shields. The small frigate broke apart under concentrated fire from a dozen enemy ships. Before her ship died, Commander Chen managed to send one final transmission to Earth. Her words would change everything. This is Commander Chen of the UES Guardian. The hegemony fleet has opened fire on medical vessels conducting humanitarian operations. They deliberately targeted shuttles carrying surgical teams. The Nightingale is heavily damaged with massive casualties. The Good Samaritan is destroyed. They fired on doctors. Repeat, they fired on doctors treating civilians. No survivors on shuttle missions. The galaxy needs to know what happened here. The transmission ended as the Guardian exploded. Admiral Thekvar watched the human ships burn. 3 vessels destroyed, 2 crippled. The remaining shuttles were fleeing back to space, abandoning their rescue mission. He had sent his message. Humans would learn to respect hegemony authority. But Thekvar had made the greatest mistake in galactic history. He had attacked the one thing humans would never forgive. He had murdered people whose only crime was trying to heal the sick and save the dying. The Admiral had no idea that his actions would soon bring the entire human species to war. The news reached Earth 18 hours after Commander Chen's final transmission. President Maria Martinez stood in the Situation Room beneath the White House, watching the footage that had arrived with the surviving ships from Haven's Rest. The video was clear and terrible. Alien warships firing on medical shuttles. The Good Samaritan exploding in a ball of fire. The Nightingale listing in space, its white hull blackened and torn. Bodies of doctors and nurses floating in the vacuum where their shuttle had been destroyed. Defense Secretary Jackson spoke quietly. Final casualty count is 473 dead. Most of them were medical personnel. The Nightingale limped back to Earth with 300 wounded aboard. President Martinez watched the footage again. She had been a nurse before entering politics. She understood what these people had volunteered to do. They went to help strangers in a distant star system. They carried medical supplies and hope, and alien warships had murdered them for it. Madam President, said Admiral Morrison, the highest-ranking officer in the Earth Defense Force. We need to discuss our response options. Martinez turned to face the room full of military officials and government leaders. What response options? They attacked medical ships conducting humanitarian operations. They fired on doctors. This isn't a border dispute or trade disagreement. This is an attack on everything we believe in. Secretary of State Thompson cleared his throat. Madam President, we should consider diplomatic solutions first. The hegemony claims it was a misunderstanding. They say Admiral Thekvar exceeded his authority. Martinez's eyes flashed with anger. A misunderstanding? They fired directly at medical shuttles. Multiple times. On camera. Then they hunted down and destroyed our escort ship when it tried to protect the medical vessels. She pointed at the screen showing the burning wreckage. Those were volunteers. Thompson. Doctors who left their families to help strangers. Nurses who believed in saving lives. They died because we taught them that compassion was a virtue. Admiral Morrison stepped forward. Madam President, if we're considering military action, I need to know what our objectives are. Martinez looked at each person in the room. These were smart, experienced people who understood politics and war. But none of them seemed to understand what had really happened. Our objective is simple, she said. We finish the mission they died trying to complete. We get medical aid to Haven's Rest, and we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. 6 hours later, President Martinez stood before a joint session of Congress. The chamber was packed. Every representative and senator was present. The gallery was filled with families of the dead and wounded. Martinez spoke without notes. Her words were broadcast across the solar system and beyond. 3 days ago, the hegemony military attacked Earth medical ships, conducting humanitarian operations. They deliberately targeted shuttles carrying surgical teams. They destroyed supply vessels loaded with medicine for dying civilians. They murdered 473 doctors, nurses, and volunteers whose only crime was trying to save lives. The chamber was silent, except for quiet sobbing from the gallery. The hegemony claims this was a misunderstanding. They want us to believe that 57 warships accidentally fired on clearly marked medical vessels. They expect us to accept that experienced military officers could not tell the difference between doctors and soldiers. Martinez's voice grew stronger. But we have the footage. We have the communications records. Admiral Thekvar was told repeatedly that our ships were on humanitarian missions. He saw the Red Crosses. He heard the medical emergency broadcasts. And he gave the order to fire anyway. She paused. letting the weight of those words settle over the room. Today, I am asking Congress to declare a state of war against the hegemony. Not because they attacked Earth, but because they attacked the very idea that mercy and compassion deserve protection. They have shown the galaxy that they consider healing the sick to be an act of war. The vote was unanimous. But Congress was not where the real response began. That started in homes and workplaces across Earth and her colonies. Within hours of the president's speech, military recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Lines of volunteers stretched for blocks. These were not professional soldiers looking for adventure. They were ordinary people who had watched the footage and decided that a galaxy where doctors could be murdered for helping others was not acceptable. Maria Santos had been a teacher for 15 years. She watched the news footage and remembered Elena Vasquez, who had been her student 20 years ago. Elena had wanted to be a doctor since she was 8 years old. Now she was dead, killed while trying to save strangers. Maria walked into the recruitment center in downtown Mexico City and enlisted that afternoon. In Tokyo, engineer Hiroshi Tanaka saw the destroyed medical shuttles and thought about his daughter, who was studying to become a nurse. He quit his job and volunteered for the Space Navy Technical Corps. Similar scenes played out across Earth. Factory workers, teachers, students, retirees. They came from every nation and background, united by simple outrage. Someone had murdered people for trying to heal the sick. The industrial response was equally swift. Earth's massive manufacturing base had been focused on exploration and trade. Shipyards built colony vessels and cargo haulers. Factories produced consumer goods and scientific equipment. All of that changed overnight. The Luna shipyards canceled civilian contracts and began producing military vessels. Mars orbital platforms switched from mining equipment to weapons manufacturing. Europa's industrial colonies started working triple shifts to produce armor and ammunition. Admiral Catherine Morrison had been retired for 3 years, growing roses in her garden in Colorado. She was 68 years old and had hoped never to see another war. But when President Martinez called her personally, Morrison did not hesitate. "Katie," the president said, using her old nickname, "I need someone to lead the response fleet. Someone the crew will follow into hell if necessary." Morrison looked out her window at her peaceful garden. Then she thought about the doctors and nurses floating dead in space near Haven's Rest. "When do I leave?" she asked. Morrison's first briefing at Fleet Command shocked even veteran officers. Earth's response was unlike anything in galactic history. Other species took months or years to mobilize for war. They debated and planned and argued about objectives. Humans were different. In 6 weeks, Earth had assembled the largest military fleet ever seen. But it was not just the size that amazed observers. It was the composition. Luxury cruise ships had been converted to troop carriers. Cargo vessels bristled with missile pods. Even civilian spacecraft had been modified for war. Mining ships now carried weapons that could crack asteroids. Research vessels had been turned into electronic warfare platforms. But the most important ships in the fleet were the medical vessels. The humans were bringing twice as many hospital ships as warships. They were not coming to conquer territory or steal resources. They were coming to finish delivering medical aid to Haven's Rest. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Righteous Fury, and looked at the tactical display. Her fleet consisted of over 300 ships and 2 million personnel. Most of them were volunteers who had never seen combat before, but they all understood their mission. "Admiral," reported her chief of staff, "all ships report ready for departure." Morrison nodded. "Signal the fleet. We're going to finish what those doctors started. And we're going to make sure the galaxy remembers what happens when you fire on medical ships." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying Earth's fury toward the hegemony. Behind them, Earth's factories continued working around the clock, building more ships and training more volunteers. The galaxy was about to learn that humans would fight harder to protect others than they ever would to protect themselves. Admiral Thekvar stood in the war room of Hegemony High Command, studying the intelligence reports with growing unease. The human fleet had been detected at the edge of hegemony space, and the numbers made no sense. 300 ships? He asked his intelligence chief. How did humans build 300 warships in 6 weeks? Most of them are not warships. Sir, replied Commander Voss, an insectoid officer from the Chithari Empire. Our scouts report converted civilian vessels, cargo ships, passenger liners, even research platforms. They have modified them with weapons, but they are not proper military vessels. Thekvar felt relieved. Humans were emotional and impulsive, but they were also new to space warfare. They were sending a mob of converted civilian ships against the finest military fleet in the galaxy. How many real warships do they have? He asked. Perhaps 50 genuine military vessels, Voss replied. The rest are improvised modifications. They should be easy to defeat, but General Kresh, the hegemony's top strategic planner, looked worried. The massive humanoid had fought in dozens of wars across the galaxy. He understood that numbers on paper did not always predict victory. Admiral, Kresh said slowly, there is something unusual about their fleet composition. Our intelligence indicates they are carrying twice as many medical ships as combat vessels. Thekvar laughed. They bring hospital ships to a war? This proves human weakness. They think war is some kind of rescue mission. That concerns me. Kresh admitted. Why bring medical ships unless they plan to take casualties? Heavy casualties. Our analysis suggests they expect to lose half their fleet. Then they are fools, Thekvar said dismissively. General Kresh studied the tactical projections. Sir, a species that expects to lose half their forces but attacks anyway is not weak. They are terrifying. The first engagement occurred at the Rigel Gate, the main hyperspace route into hegemony territory. Admiral Korvac commanded the defensive fleet there. 48 warships in a strong defensive position, protected by orbital weapons platforms and minefields. Korvac was a veteran commander who had never lost a battle. He watched the human fleet approach and felt confident. The aliens came in a loose formation, their converted civilian ships scattered among their military vessels. They looked like amateurs. Open communication to the human fleet, Korvac ordered. When the channel opened, he spoke formally. Human commander, you are ordered to withdraw from hegemony space immediately. This is your only warning. The response came from Admiral Morrison aboard the Righteous Fury. Her voice was calm but hard. This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Emergency Response Fleet. We are proceeding to Haven's Rest to deliver medical aid. Any ship that interferes with our humanitarian mission will be considered an act of war. Korvac blinked in surprise. The humans were treating this like a rescue mission, not a military invasion. They spoke as if the hegemony fleet was preventing them from helping sick people. Admiral Morrison, you are trespassing in sovereign hegemony territory with an armed fleet. Withdraw now, or face the consequences. Morrison's reply was immediate. Admiral, our medical personnel were murdered while trying to save civilian lives. We are here to complete their mission. Stand aside. Korvac looked at his tactical display. The human fleet was still approaching. They showed no sign of slowing down or changing course. They acted like his 48 warships did not exist. All ships, prepare for combat, Korvac ordered. The humans want to fight. But when the battle began, Korvac realized he had misunderstood everything about human warfare. The humans did not fight like any species he had faced before. They did not try to preserve their ships or minimize casualties. They fought like each battle was an emergency rescue where every second mattered. A converted cargo ship rammed his flagship, sacrificing itself to damage his shields. Mining vessels used their industrial equipment to tear apart his cruisers. Even civilian ships threw themselves at his defenses with suicidal fury. But the most shocking thing was their coordination. Despite being mostly civilian volunteers, the human fleet fought with perfect unity. Every ship seemed to understand that their mission was more important than their survival. Korvac's defensive line held for 2 hours. Then, human forces broke through on 3 sides simultaneously. The admiral watched in disbelief as his fleet was overwhelmed by converted freighters and passenger ships. As his flagship's shields failed, Korvac sent his final report to High Command. Human fleet tactics are unlike anything in our databases. They accept catastrophic losses without hesitation. Recommend immediate reinforcement of all defensive positions. These are not ordinary military forces. Admiral Morrison stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display as her fleet swept through the wreckage of the Rigel Gate defenses. She had lost 37 ships in the battle, including several converted civilian vessels whose crews had volunteered for suicide missions. "Admiral," reported her chief of staff, "we have secured the gate. The path to hegemony core systems is open." Morrison nodded grimly. "Signal the medical ships to begin rescue operations. Hegemony and human survivors both. Then we continue toward Haven's Rest." The sight of human medical vessels rescuing enemy wounded shocked hegemony commanders throughout the region. These aliens had just fought a brutal battle, but they immediately began treating injured enemies with the same care they gave their own wounded. The news spread quickly through hegemony space. The humans were not conquering territory or looting resources. They were fighting their way to a disaster site to deliver medical aid. At the Battle of Vega Station, Admiral Thekvar personally led a fleet of 80 ships against the advancing human forces. He was confident that superior numbers and proper military training would stop the human advance. He was wrong. The humans fought with a desperation he had never seen. They used tactics that violated every principle of military science. Civilian ships charged directly into his battle line. Converted freighters exploded themselves against his cruisers. Even damaged human vessels continued fighting until they were completely destroyed. But worst of all was their purpose. Thekvar intercepted human communications during the battle. The humans were not fighting for territory or glory. They were fighting because they believed the hegemony was evil. A human captain broadcast on open channels as his ship was being destroyed. "This is for the doctors you murdered. This is for the sick people you left to die." Thekvar realized with growing horror that the humans saw this war as a moral crusade. They were not fighting the hegemony military. They were fighting for every innocent person the hegemony had ever failed to protect. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Thekvar's fleet was scattered. The humans had lost almost half their ships, but they continued toward Haven's Rest without slowing down. As his damaged flagship retreated, Thekvar finally understood what General Kresh had tried to tell him. The humans were not weak because they cared about saving lives. They were terrifying because they would sacrifice everything to protect others. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Thekvar felt fear. The human fleet carved a path through hegemony space like a sword of fire. At every battle, they paid a terrible price. Hundreds of ships were destroyed. Thousands of human volunteers died in the fighting, but they never stopped. They never slowed down. They fought through every defensive position between them and Haven's Rest with single-minded determination. Hegemony Command tried everything to stop them. Massive space battles, ambush tactics, even diplomatic offers. The humans ignored everything except their mission. They were going to deliver medical aid to Haven's Rest, and nothing in the galaxy would stop them. As the human fleet approached its destination, Admiral Morrison looked at her tactical display. She had started with 300 ships. Now she had fewer than 150, but they had reached Haven's Rest. The planet hung ahead of them, still wrapped in the brown clouds of radiation damage. Still full of dying people who had waited months for help. "Signal all ships," Morrison ordered. "Begin medical operations. And signal what's left of the hegemony fleet in this system. Tell them we're here to finish what we started." The final battle for Haven's Rest was about to begin. The remaining hegemony ships around Haven's Rest waited in tense formation as the human fleet approached. Admiral Thekvar commanded only 12 vessels now, all that survived from his original force of 57. The others had been destroyed or had fled during the human advance through hegemony space. Thekvar studied the approaching human fleet with growing dread. When the war began, Earth had sent 300 ships. Now fewer than 150 remained. The humans had lost more than half their force fighting through his defenses, but they were still coming. "Admiral," reported his communications officer. "The humans are broadcasting on all frequencies." Admiral Morrison's voice echoed across the Haven's Rest system. "Attention all ships. This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Emergency Response Fleet. We are here to complete a humanitarian mission that began 3 months ago. Medical teams are standing by to assist all survivors on the planet's surface, regardless of species or political affiliation. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Any ship that interferes with our medical operations will be destroyed. Any ship that wishes to assist in rescue operations is welcome to coordinate with our medical command. Thekvar felt his hands shake as he gripped his command chair. The human admiral spoke as if she had already won, as if his remaining ships were not a threat but merely an obstacle to be brushed aside. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly. "What are your orders?" Thekvar looked at his display. 12 damaged hegemony ships against nearly 150 human vessels. The humans had fought through the entire hegemony fleet to reach this point. They had accepted terrible losses without hesitation, and they were here to deliver medical aid. "Admiral," came Morrison's voice again, "I am giving you one opportunity to withdraw your ships peacefully. We have no quarrel with vessels that do not threaten our medical mission." Thekvar closed his eyes. He was the admiral who had started this war. He had given the order to fire on medical ships. Now the humans had fought across half the galaxy to finish the mission his actions had prevented. "Signal the fleet," he said slowly. "All ships are to withdraw to the outer system. Do not interfere with human operations." His bridge crew stared at him in shock. They were surrendering without a fight. "Sir?" his tactical officer asked. "You're ordering retreat?" Thekvar looked at the display showing the human fleet. Ships that had been luxury cruise liners 6 weeks ago. Cargo vessels converted to troop carriers. Mining ships equipped with weapons. All of them crewed by volunteers who had left their homes to complete a medical mission. "Look at them," he said quietly. "They lost half their fleet fighting to get here. And they're still coming. We cannot stop people like that." Within hours, human medical ships were landing on Haven's Rest. The planet's surface was a wasteland of collapsed buildings and radiation-poisoned ground, but the human medical teams went to work immediately. Dr. Sarah Kim had volunteered for the mission after watching the footage of the destroyed medical shuttles. She was a radiation specialist who had trained for exactly this kind of disaster. Now, she worked frantically to save lives that should have been saved 3 months ago. "How many survivors?" she asked her team, as they set up their mobile medical facility. "Current count is approximately 400,000, replied Nurse Johnson. "But many are in critical condition. The delay in medical treatment has made things worse." Dr. Kim felt anger burn in her chest. 400,000 people, reduced from the original 2.3 million. If the medical convoy had been allowed to complete its original mission, over 1 million lives could have been saved. But there was no time for anger now. Only time to save who they could. The human medical teams worked with desperate efficiency. They had the equipment and supplies that had been denied to Haven's Rest for 3 months. Advanced medical pods, radiation treatment systems, surgical theaters that could operate in contaminated environments. But they also had something else. They had the determination of people who were completing a sacred mission. Every patient they saved was a victory against the forces that had murdered their colleagues. Admiral Morrison established her command center on the planet's surface, coordinating the massive relief operation. Human ships landed constantly, bringing more medical teams, more supplies, more equipment. The humans were saving every life they could reach. "Admiral," reported Colonel Martinez, the ground operations commander. "We have medical facilities operational in all major population centers. Estimated time for full evacuation of critical patients is 72 hours. Morrison nodded. "What about enemy interference?" "None, ma'am. The hegemony ships are maintaining their distance. Several alien commanders have actually offered to assist with refugee transport." Morrison was not surprised. The sight of human medical teams working to save enemy civilians had shocked many hegemony officers. For the first time, they were seeing what humans had tried to do 3 months ago. On the 3rd day of operations, Admiral Thekvar made an unexpected decision. He contacted Admiral Morrison directly. "Admiral Morrison," his voice was subdued, "I request permission to speak with you." Morrison accepted the communication. The reptilian admiral appeared on her screen, looking older and more tired than in the previous recordings. "Admiral Morrison, I want to see what you are doing here," Thekvar said. "You're welcome to visit our medical facilities," Morrison replied. Under flag of truce. 2 hours later, Thekvar's shuttle landed near the main human medical compound. He stepped out, wearing no weapons, and carrying a white flag of peaceful intent. The sight that greeted him changed everything he believed about warfare. Human medical teams worked frantically to save anyone they could find. They treated hegemony civilians with the same care they gave Earth colonists. Species that were traditionally enemies worked side by side in the human medical facilities. Dr. Kim showed the Admiral through the intensive care ward. "This is what we came here to do," she said simply. "Save lives. All lives." Thekvar watched human doctors working to save a young Saurian child, the same species as himself. The medical team was exhausted, covered in radiation, protective gear, but they worked with intense focus to keep the child alive. "Why?" Thekvar asked. "Why do you treat our people the same as your own?" Dr. Kim looked at him with surprise. "Because they're sick. Because they need help. Because that's what doctors do." For the first time, Admiral Thekvar understood what he had really attacked 3 months ago. Not just human ships, but human values, the belief that helping others was more important than politics or territory or military authority. When the medical evacuation was complete, Admiral Morrison called a conference with all remaining military commanders in the system. Representatives from 6 different species attended, including Admiral Thekvar. Morrison stood before them in the same chamber where they had planned the original attack on the medical convoy. Her words would echo across the galaxy for generations. "Today marks the end of active military operations in the Haven's Rest system," she began. "The humanitarian mission that began 3 months ago has been completed. But this war has taught us all an important lesson." She looked directly at each alien commander. "The Terran Union hereby establishes the Morrison Doctrine. Any attack on medical personnel, humanitarian missions, or rescue operations will be met with immediate and total warfare." Admiral Thekvar felt a chill run through his body. Morrison continued, "We don't care about your politics, your territories, or your military authority. We don't care about border disputes or trade disagreements. But if you target doctors, if you destroy hospital ships, if you prevent medical aid from reaching those who need it, we will hunt you across the galaxy." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Some of you think this makes us weak. You think caring about others is a flaw to be exploited. Today, you learned differently." The alien commanders sat in stunned silence. The humans had just fought through the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy to deliver medical supplies. They had sacrificed half their fleet to complete a humanitarian mission. "The Morrison Doctrine is now in effect," Admiral Morrison concluded. "Touch a doctor, destroy a hospital ship, and we will show you what human war looks like when we fight for others." 6 months later, Maria Vasquez graduated from the new Terran Emergency Medical Fleet Academy. She was Elena Vasquez's younger sister, inspired to follow in her footsteps by the heroic sacrifice at Haven's Rest. Above the academy entrance, carved in stone, were the words that had become humanity's promise to the galaxy. "So that mercy needs no permission." The Morrison Doctrine changed everything about galactic politics. Other species had always seen humanitarian missions as optional, something to be allowed or denied based on political convenience. But humans made medical aid non-negotiable. They had proven they would go to war with anyone who targeted healers. The sight of converted cargo ships ramming alien battleships to protect medical shuttles became legendary across the galaxy. No species wanted to face the kind of war humans fought when their mercy was challenged. The galaxy learned to respect the Red Cross, not because it was law, but because humans would enforce it with total warfare. Years later, alien historians would mark the Haven's Rest incident as the moment humanity announced itself to the galaxy, not as conquerors or traders or explorers, but as protectors, as a species that would sacrifice everything to defend the principle that helping others was sacred. The hegemony never recovered from their defeat. Admiral Thekvar spent the rest of his life working with human medical missions, trying to atone for his mistake. And across the galaxy, doctors and nurses worked under the protection of human warships, knowing that mercy finally had guardians who would never hesitate to defend it. The price of attacking medical